today. Thank you everyone for joining us. We are so excited to have you here for our National Town Hall and Student Series. I am Dwayne Brejak, he, him. I am the Executive Director for the Michigan chapter of NASW. I am a macro licensed social worker with a history kind of in politics and community organizing. And I've been with the Michigan chapter now for 9 years and newly in my role as Executive Director. Tonight, we're excited to have a continued conversation with our student series and on hot topics in field education and the needs of social work students across the United States. We have 3 amazing panelists with us tonight who will share some of their expertise, resources, and areas for advocacy on topics ranging from ethical considerations in social work education, unpaid internships, and opportunities for advocacy, and other national conversations happening on your campuses across the country. Kind of how the flow of today will work. We'll have about 20 minutes for each of our panelists, with the last 20 minutes of our time together, which will open up for full questions and resources from you all on the line today. We do ask that you please keep yourself muted during tonight's town hall if possible, and type your questions into the chat box. I will do my best to moderate and relay as many of those as possible to our panelists during each segment as possible. We know we're not going to have time for all questions likely tonight, so feel free to reach out to any of the panelists or myself after the event. I will make sure our emails get put into the chat during today's session. We hope that tonight will be the beginning of some really important conversations for many of us in the field, that it will be a place where you can feel supported by your larger social work community, and that you will leave feeling inspired by the work of your colleagues across the country. After tonight, we hope that you will join us at one of our upcoming national student events, which can be found at socialworkers.org. The next of those is going to be on Monday, December 13th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that event is going to be titled All Social Work is Macro Social Work, Learning About Non-Traditional Social Work Career Options. And as a macro social worker, I'm excited about that one specifically, but there's a lot of good programming coming up between now and the end of this academic year. So before we turn it over to kind of our first topic, I'd like to introduce our 3 panelists today. Our first panelist, Monica Rich McLaurin, is a seasoned social worker with more than 25 years of experience. She has worked with the entire lifespan in a myriad of settings, from foster care, outpatient mental health, and inpatient mental health to community outreach and assertive community treatment services. Monica is the CEO and founder of Paramount Consulting Group, which provides accreditation preparation services to organizations that provide behavioral health services, children and youth services, and opioid treatment programs. In November 2020, Monica was appointed chairwoman of the National Association of Social Workers National Ethics Committee, where she is charged with assuring the ethical integrity of the social work profession by participating in professional review where ethical violations have been alleged, as well as assisting in the revision of the NASW Code of Ethics and Professional Review Manual to reflect our current practice. Monica has served as the chairwoman and secretary of the Michigan Chapter Ethics Committee, where I know Monica through, and has participated in mediation and adjudication hearings on a state and national level. Additionally, Monica serves on an advisory board member for Sisters Making It Happen, a nonprofit that provides mentoring and empowerment workshops to vulnerable and at-risk populations, including teens and single parents. She served as an elected official, as a precinct delegate in Oakland County, Michigan, and is a proud and active member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Welcome, Monica. Our second panelist is Devon Jones. Devon was born and raised in Dayton, Ohio. Go Blue, Devon. Just had to throw that in there before we get to a couple weeks from now. Received his undergraduate degree in political science and religious studies from Hiram College. As a lifelong learner, Devon stated his key goal in life is to see the improvement in the outcomes of those in need. He is currently a graduate student at the Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences at Case Western Reserve University, pursuing a dual degree in social administration and nonprofit management with a certificate in gerontology. Devon is currently working at Case Western in the Department of Quantitative Health Sciences as a community research advocate on Alzheimer's disease study focused on minority population genetics. Since moving to Cleveland, Devon has worked with various local organizations such as Neighborhood Connections and the Greater Cleveland Neighborhood Center Association. In addition, he currently serves as a program director of the Cleveland Observer and serves on the advisory board of the Phoebe Foundation, which specializes in financial literacy. Recently, Devon co-founded a nonprofit consultancy, Crown Connections, which focuses on elevating nonprofit organizations. And lastly, Devon currently serves as an MSW organizer for the NASW Ohio chapter. We're very thrilled to have you with us as well, Devon. And then lastly, Sage Brand. Sage is currently an MSW candidate at UCLA and is an intern with the California chapter of NASW. Sage completed their bachelor's and master's degree in global health at the University of California, San Diego. Sage also attended Trinity College, Dublin for a study abroad exchange program with their Gilman Scholarship from the U.S. Department of State. They have worked in treatment facilities for mental health and substance use disorders within the San Diego area and subsequently at a former foster youth program at UCSD. Sage brings over 10 years of work experience in industries ranging from education to sales in Dr. Bronner's. They are now an active leader at UCLA as president of the Collegiate Recovery Program. Over this past summer, Sage worked at the California Community College's Chancellor Office to create basic needs toolkit for the bill AB 1326. Sage enjoys mentoring other foster youth and transfer students into higher education. So welcome, Sage, Monica, and Devon to today's discussion. We are so happy to have you here, and I'm looking forward to learning from all of you.
Pause right now? No, it's just this like.
So as we get into today's conversation, we're going to start with Monica and talk about some of the ethical considerations that folks are facing in BSW and MSW programs across the country. So Monica, I'm just wondering if you could start us off by talking about some of the more common ethical situations you have heard about as someone on the ethics committee, both here in Michigan and nationally.
Absolutely. And again, Dwayne, thank you so much for inviting me. And it's great to see so many people here tonight. So with regards to some trends that we've seen with ethical complaints, we've actually seen some child custody cases, believe it or not. And these child custody cases are where the child might be in one parent's custody and the other parent who's non-custodial wants to file a complaint on behalf of the child against a clinician. And at one particular point, the question comes up, does that particular parent have standing to file on behalf of the child? So, child custody laws vary from state to state. So it makes it somewhat of a challenge for the NEC to really be able to look at it through a very clear lens to be able to make that determination. However, we do have an amazingly supportive legal team, which was able to kind of help us to bend our way through some of those things, which was very, very helpful. And then some of the other trends, believe it or not, we're seeing with a lot of people who work in private practice. We're not seeing so much with individuals who work within, larger organizations, but it's primarily the private practice that we're seeing. And, there could be a disgruntled patient of a clinician. So those are things that we've seen. However, knowing that I'm speaking to an audience of BSW and MSW students, I'm certain that either you have been or you will be presented with situations where you're asked to function outside of your scope of practice, meaning that if you are a BSW student, you may be asked to do something that perhaps is at a master's level, or on a macro side. If you're a macro student for a master's program, you might be asked to do something on the clinical side. And that's one big caution that I advise everybody to make sure that they're aware of in their respective states. I would encourage you to look up the scope of practice for social workers in your state. And it actually has like different categories and check boxes and things like that, things such as like assessment, diagnosing, things of that sort. So you want to be careful about making sure that you do practice in your scope of expertise. And especially for MSW students who have an LBSW, that's particularly challenging, especially if you're doing it while you're still working and your employer says, hey, I need you to do this assessment on this person. Okay, but do you have the license to be able to appropriately do that, as well as diagnosing? So I know that a lot of students at times, face a quandary, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle this situation? And, part of one thing that we do as social workers is that we advocate so much for others. In this case, we have to advocate for ourselves. So it's not uncommon for students to go to, whomever's supervising their placement or their supervisor to say, hey, I understand that, you're eager for me to complete my degree and get licensed and be able to do all of these amazing things. However, at this particular point, I cannot, according to the state scope of practice grid. And in some cases, it's respected. I think in most cases, it's usually respected. I think sometimes, the supervisors of placements and practicums just try to tend to push that bar, because there is such a need for social workers in all kinds of settings. So as soon as they see one coming that's like brand new and green, they're like, okay, we can get you to do this, we can get you to do that. So I just want to make sure that you all are aware of that. And I think those are probably the two top trends that we're seeing currently in the National Office for Complaints. So, the private practice part, I definitely feel like warrants private practitioners to be more cognizant and aware of the different facets of the code of ethics. And not to say that they're not familiar with it, but once you get in your own independent practice, you begin to do things as you would want to do them based off of previous experience. And I think that, a good refresher is always beneficial. There have been some updates to the code of ethics, and if you do not have it, you can actually look at it on NASW-DC.org, actually, which is socialworkers.org now. So you can take a look at some of the changes, but two of the more recent changes to the code include self-care and cultural competence. And we identified these things, especially self-care. I was a part of the subcommittee that worked on that particular component, because it's so important that we make it a point to take care of ourselves. We give of ourselves wholeheartedly. And I just think that that is simply a characteristic of being a social worker, that at times we also have to take a step back and to do a self-evaluation and say, is my battery fully charged? And if your battery is not, or if it's being almost depleted, then you have to take some action to benefit yourself. Cultural competence was also another change that was made to the code of ethics. And I think that certainly comes in light of more of the diversity, equity, and inclusion that I think every school and every population has been dealing with. But I think it's definitely more prevalent in the field of social work, because we want to make sure that we're respecting all cultural backgrounds, gender identities, gender expressions, observed and unobserved. Can we ask everyone to mute, please? Thank you. What was I saying? We were talking about, lost my thought on that one. It'll come back to me though. But I just want this to really be like an open exchange of conversation and Q&As. I don't see anything in the chat yet, but a couple of things that I did want to kind of go over with you all is, the ethical considerations with COVID. So COVID hit us big and hard March of 2020, shut the entire world down, literally. And for people like me who are like a social butterfly and love to see people in person, it certainly put a damper on my social butterflyness. So as a result, we all had to immediately transition to providing services virtually, if in fact we wanted to do that. I'm not going to say I wasn't a big proponent of it, but it certainly was not my preferred thing, because literally, like, we're all on this Zoom call right now and we see each other essentially from like the rib cage up, and that's all that you see. So you can't observe like finger twitching, foot twitching, things of that sort. So that does inhibit a clinician to be able to fully see what that client is experiencing. So I did do a presentation with the University of Michigan School of Social Work on COVID-19 ethics and social work implications for practice, which, Dwayne, if I can dig up that link, I will certainly post it so that you can share with the group. It has a PowerPoint, it has some resources on there. So I would certainly encourage you all to take a look at that. Let's see, what other notes do I have here? Oh, what to do if you suspect a violation. So all of you currently as students in the social work program, you all are charged with, making sure that your colleagues adhere to the code of ethics. And I mean, it's not like you're going to be the ethics police running around making sure everybody does everything spot on, but there are some things that can be pretty egregious that you can observe. And, the first thing is, oh my gosh, how do I handle this? The first thing that I encourage you to do is to talk to the person that you observed making the violation and to have that conversation with them. Sometimes it can be resolved at that level. If it's more of a larger organizational type violation, then we encourage you to go on to socialworkers.org and to click on ethics, and you can do a request for a professional review, even as a BSW or MSW student. So don't think just because I'm a student, I don't have this obligation. Yes, you do. So what happens is that once you complete a request for professional review, it gets sent to our national office to one of our esteemed colleagues, Shauna Swain or Andrea Murray, who takes a look at that complaint to make sure pretty much that the timelines are being met. There are some rules surrounding it and timelines in which we like to have those things completed. So once that is received, then it is scheduled for an intake subcommittee meeting. And usually those intake subcommittees include one of the members from the National Ethics Committee, as well as chapter offices are invited as well to participate in the hearing because it's coming from their state. And then we just kind of look at the facts in the case, not necessarily the minutia, but we look at what's on that request for professional review. So we look at, okay, was the person a member of NASW first? Is this something that rises to the level of an adjudication or mediation? Are the alleged violations mentioned in our code of ethics? And typically they are. I mean, we have had some very interesting nuances. Again, the disgruntled client who just wants to just spew out a whole bunch of different stuff. And then in some of their addendums in terms of what they would like to see happen, oftentimes the disgruntled client is saying, I want that person's license pulled. I want this to happen. I want that to happen. I want them to get fired from their job. Those are things that NASW has absolutely zero control over. So we always advise complainants that there are other avenues they can choose to pursue if in fact they feel like our process is not actually what they need. So of course, LARA, the licensing and regulations body here in Michigan, is definitely one of those resources, as well as in your respective states. So if it's accepted for adjudication or mediation, then the case goes back to Shauna, and Shauna communicates with the complainant and the respondent, and we begin to negotiate some dates for those things. And an adjudication is much more intense, I would say, than a mediation. A mediation is essentially just trying to have a meeting of the minds and to kind of discuss the facts of the case, what happened, how can we work on this, how can we make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. Adjudications are a bit more serious, where we have to look at, what type of correction do we think that this person needs? And oftentimes it depends on the length of time that it has been occurring. I mean, if it's a one-time incident, sometimes things can be resolved with a simple updated training. Sometimes there are other things that require more frequent consultation by a member of either the state or the National Ethics Committee, just to assure that they are conforming to those things. And then last but not least, I would certainly encourage any of you who are not currently members of the NASW to certainly become one as a student. The student rates are amazing. And Dwayne, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe those student rates extend for, I think, 2 years past graduation, or is it kind of like a transitional rate?
3 years, yeah, post-graduation.
Yeah, right. And, they're an excellent resource for licensing questions, saying, how do I do this? Where do I go for this? And there's also a lot of amazing subcommittees that you guys can get involved in. A lot of social action, social justice, community organizing, things of that sort. And also the added benefit is that your professional liability insurance is remarkably affordable, even for me as a clinician of over 25 years, even though I don't look a day over 35, it's quite affordable. So I would certainly encourage you all to look into that and to give it some serious consideration. So at this point, I don't have any other things to share, but I'm certainly open to hearing any comments or questions from anybody on the floor.
So Monica, as you mentioned, social justice and community organizing work, one of the questions, especially over the last 2 years that we've been hearing from students is around, I want to be an advocate and an activist in my community. I want to participate in rallies, in protests, and social justice work. Will that impact my ability to get licensed if I, say, get arrested at one of those events? What is your kind of take from an ethical perspective and maybe your sense from past complainants on that particular area?
Right. And actually that question did come up. We were looking at that in terms of, if there is an arrest, because when you look at the LARA guidelines, at least in the state of Michigan, it does ask if you've ever been convicted of a felony or misdemeanor. And if so, then you have to provide a written explanation. And actually, it didn't come up so much with the National Ethics Committee. It came up with one of the U of M School of Social Work classes that I was a guest speaker at. And, it was the moral turpitude statement. And in my professional opinion, I would say absolutely not. It would not impede the licensing process. However, I would encourage you to certainly be as transparent as you can. Sometimes on licensing applications and job applications, sometimes you don't want to share everything from your dark sordid past, but this is where you have to share, unfortunately. And I encourage people, even who may have had felonies from like 30 years ago, you still have to share it. I think that LARA is very open and very forgiving. What they want to see is that if there was something that was committed 30 years ago, has it happened again since? So they look at those cases individually. It doesn't necessarily mean that you would not be licensed, but it might take a little extra time for them to do a bit of a more critical review.
Yeah, and what I can say on that too, here in Michigan specifically, and I'm sure this is true many states, is that we have an ethical mandate to be advocates, right? That's the whole section 6 of our code of ethics, which makes us a little bit different than some of the other helping professions. And most of the time, if you're protesting, rallying, doing all the good social justice work that we want you to do, it's not going to lead to a felony or even a misdemeanor. If you get arrested, that's even not necessarily going to do anything against your license. But like you said, depending on your state, they may want supporting documentation. We've got people on our board who've been arrested at protests before here in Michigan. We've had former people on our board of social work that have gotten social justice work. And we encourage good trouble in social work. And so I think that you want to be cautious that you're not doing anything like setting buildings on fire, but we as social workers, we're doing a lot of really good. And now is the time that I think that there's a lot of folks going into social work that are really activist mindset that may be a little bit different than some generations of social work in the past. So it's pretty exciting to see at the student level that kind of engagement on our campuses.
Right.
I'm curious from either of our other panelists or Monica, if you have suggestions, if a student did have an ethical issue in your state, what are some resources that you would tell folks to go to, whether that be on campus or through NASW?
I would certainly say NASW and also your School of Social Work. If you have like a faculty advisor, I would certainly have that conversation with them first. If it's something that is really still bothering you, even after you have that conversation, the deans of the social work programs are very accessible and they want to know, they want to see the students, they want to meet the students, and, just schedule an appointment with them and just go in and have a quick conversation with them to talk about what your concerns are. And then of course, again, the last thing would be to like file a request for professional review. But hopefully it doesn't get to that point. Sage, Devon, you have any suggestions as well?
I had something kind of like I ran into this when I was trying to get resources from the state, and somebody asked me about my background, and just straight up asked point blank. And then I just went to somebody at a different office to speak to them, like a superior, and say like, hey, like this counselor is asking about this. I'm pretty sure it's not, you know, it was one of those type of things that it seemed like discrimination.
Yeah.
And so there's that, but also I know a lot of the University of California's have worked on removing the box about former incarceration, but yes, it's definitely a pro in social work, I find, to have a background in certain areas. It gives you like a lived experience kind of that other things can't. So don't think about leaving it out on your essay or things like that when you're applying, if, you know, that's an area. But I don't know if Devon has anything to add.
I think that in certain regards, you know, the getting into good trouble, as I would say, is a necessity to pushing the passion of learning and growing within the field. I got into all my good trouble before I decided to become a social worker. So I really wouldn't even know if I should be concerned. I always wore it as a badge of honor to be involved in places and spaces that's advocating for meaningful change. And so if you are in a place or space that is, I think, mission-driven and ethical in nature, I think the result may not be as people would want it to be, but raising awareness for people's rights is always a necessity. And as social workers, we have a certain privilege over some of our other, I think, movement colleagues or people who are involved in movements similar to us. I think we have a good understanding of systems, but we also know how to connect with those people that we may be advocating for, with, or enjoying with. So,
yeah. Yeah, and those three comments really do filter into, there's a question from Amanda in the chat too, that I think ties into kind of all what we're going to talk about today. But, you know, social work. So I'm just going to read the question. I have a strong interest in pursuing community and social services based modalities that would present a radical alternative to policing. This is where I anticipate some degree of ethical conflict throughout my social work career and schooling. While the NASW Code of Ethics affirms service user right to self-determination, the reality is that many people's interactions with social workers occur on an involuntary basis. And Monica, I'm sure you have some experience with this with ethical and clinical practice.
Absolutely.
Governing social work institutions regularly collaborate with and/or enable systems of surveillance, coercion, punishment, e.g. police, ICE, carceral, psychiatric treatment, etc. This causes immeasurable harm to systemically marginalized, traumatized communities. And I believe the ethics of social work profession are damaged and delegitimized when the field allies itself with these systems. As a future MSW student and social worker, I'm curious as to why the NASW has not taken a more explicitly abolitionist stance towards carceral institutions. And so, I mean, that's a loaded question and statement. So I'm wondering if folks have an initial comment or thought on that.
Yeah, I can certainly speak from, you know, what, at least a bit as to why the NASW has not taken a more explicit abolitionist stance. I will say, Amanda, that, you know, during a lot of the more recent events in our country, such as the insurrection on the Capitol, the Black Lives Matter movement, the murder of George Floyd, all of those things have certainly been discussed within our committee. And we have had some very candid and some very open conversations regarding positions on that. With regards to why the NASW as a whole has not done that, unfortunately, the NASW still has its own hierarchy and has its own levels of politics that are still involved in doing what's correct according to the overarching bylaws of the NASW. Now, to say that us as the National Ethics Committee couldn't go out and take a stance, absolutely we could. Absolutely we could. But in terms of the organization as a whole, I really can't give another excuse other than the hierarchy within the organization as a whole. So I'm sorry if I'm not giving you necessarily what you want here, but I do agree with regards to the immeasurable harm that it causes these particular communities. I totally agree with you on that one. And also the lack of voluntary treatment. those things certainly do happen. You know, being in Michigan, I'm closer to the Metro Detroit area where our local crisis and trauma hospitals tend to see a lot of people coming in, especially around this time of year because it's cold. You know, people who have severe and persistent mental illness who are coming in, and either they're looking for a warm bed or they may actually be having a mental health crisis. So those things have to kind of be looked at in terms of voluntary versus involuntary. But nonetheless, I certainly agree that there's always harm that is caused to a certain degree when somebody is placed somewhere where they do not want to be. So hopefully my colleagues might have some comments on this, and also we may be able to touch on it a bit further in our presentation this evening. Thanks.
Sage and Devon, either of you have any comments on that one before I?
Not really.
I think, you know, it's a good question, Amanda. The whole field of social work works within oppressive systems, right? Whether we're working in the criminal justice system, the education system, the child welfare system, you know, our behavioral health system, all of those systems historically has oppressed, marginalized communities, and where social work has thrived is being the advocates both inside those systems and outside those systems, right? And so I think as an organization, our NASW, sometimes the struggle is we have to support both, right? We need the people that are building and creating a new ideal world, but we also need the folks who are working internally to make sure that clients are assisted as appropriately as possible with the current policies, while also pushing to change things at the same time. And so social work always struggles with that, whether we're working in the prison systems, with police, within child welfare, right? There are huge barriers that many of our clients face, and what we face as individuals, right? We know not all social work organizations are practicing from an ethical lens all the time as well, or there are practitioners out there that are doing questionable things that we have to, that's why we have accountability. And through NASW, we also want social workers to get involved in our racial justice work. You know, we're only as strong as the members who are helping us push things forward. There are a lot of abolitionist social workers working within the association and the association leadership to make change and to make sure conversations are happening. But like Monica said, sometimes things take change, and honestly, there's a lot of complex relationships that an organization like NASW has to manage, whether that be political or within the social work field. And so we want to be a strong advocate for our social workers, but also understanding that we have to be able to push within and from the outside of many of the organizations that we exist within. And that can be very challenging in a lot of the work that we do. And we hope that all of you all in your field placements, in your classes, and then in your work you do out in the field are doing the same thing, because most of our agencies, we have to continue to push, right? And move those conversations forward. Same thing within our social work associations and organizations. So that's a great comment though. And with that, I think that's a good kind of transition into a really other big topic in social work is ethics and unpaid internships. So Devon, I know you're doing some really wonderful work in Ohio on this. And so I'm hoping you can give us the quick and dirty of what you're doing in Ohio, ways for folks to get involved, and some conversations about maybe what's going on in other states.
Yes. First, thank you, Dwayne, for allowing me to speak today. Thank you to the Michigan chapter. Thank you, Monica, for a wonderful presentation on ethics. Looking forward to you, Sage. So I am really excited to speak with you guys about this today. At first, I was perplexed on giving some type of formal or written presentation about this issue, but I don't think it's really much that you can do formally to talk about the unfairness or the inequity in unpaid field placements or field practicums. I could put a bunch of statistics on a PowerPoint. I could do a bunch of things to talk about this issue at large, but I think that for the majority of the people in this Zoom room, you have this experience directly. And I think that kind of segues into the goal of this current project that we have from the Ohio chapter is we have three trimesters of this project. Yeah, so we're birthing a baby of equity. Okay, this is necessity. And so the idea is the first trimester, which is going to January, February, is focuses on storytelling and hearing the experiences of individuals such as yourselves on this call, on this Zoom room, because we want to understand what is it like for the everyday people who are graduate students or undergraduate students who are experiencing paid or unpaid field practicums. And so there's 3 ways that we are currently allowing people to get involved, and we're going to post more things as we move forward. Currently, there's an Instagram video posted on the NASW-Ohio page, and it basically offers the idea where if you are a student who is currently going through an unpaid or paid field practicum, or you have recently graduated from a program, we want to hear your experience. We would love to hear you make a video of 60 to 90 seconds answering specific questions. Dwayne posted a link in the chat, and that's where you can refer to the actual website for this. Another way is a survey. So attached to this storytelling idea to prioritize hearing from everyone here, we want to, I think, gain data and gain insight on what the true experiences are and be able to reflect them and show them as we move forward with this project. At the end of this, the goal is not to, ensure that everybody receives paid field placements, but instead to raise awareness. There's various stakeholders involved in this. You have the field placement agencies, you have the students themselves, you have the schools. And so the goal is to connect these different dots and see where everyone's head is and where everyone lies and who's our allies and who is not. But there's one thing that is for sure, and that we have always talked about from the beginning of this project, is we want to address this, and we want to ensure that the equity issue is addressed. My graduate experience has been the total opposite of my undergraduate. During my undergraduate, I received paid internships from my sophomore year to my senior year. And it changed my quality of life during my undergraduate in certain ways I couldn't speak about. And so moving to a graduate, I took a gap year in between, and I struggled the entire gap year. I work a total of 12 jobs, starting at $8.25 and at the end making $12. And so this idea of, struggling in social economic classes and races, this issue is tied to that. And so when I started my graduate career, I go to Case Western. This is the only school, I think there's a very few that offer a paid stipend for their students. It's $250 a month, $1,000 a semester. But even with that, the struggle was, it was real. And I can guarantee that there's many other people in similar situations. And, we are in a position of privilege because we do have resources such as the Graduate Plus loan, but things of that nature. But that also comes to the question of why should you go into further debt in ensuring a much more, I think, certainty of financial struggle long-term, when if you had received a paid field practicum in certain ways that would have changed the outcome or resulted in you taking out less loans. And so this is an issue that is, number one, tied to social and economic class, racial justice and equality, but also it provides barriers to entry for the profession. And so we are very interested in hearing the stories and hearing other people's takes on this and their experiences, because we want to be able to show this to the different stakeholders that this is an issue that we can begin to address and that we can bring everyone to the table and ensure that we have a fair and equitable and productive conversation about this. So if you have any questions, let me know. I would love to answer any of them. Yeah.
Devon, thank you so much for the work that you and the Ohio chapter are doing. I'm wondering, as you've started this project, have there been any unique ways that you have found or heard of that either schools or individual agencies have found to pay interns?
So I think it kind of goes around to, similar to the nonprofit space, we're a little trendy behind what we throw our dollars behind and what we prioritize as social worker practice necessities or needs. And so an example of that could be with the state of Ohio and their HRSA grant focused on the opioid epidemic and training social workers of the next generation to address or to combat this issue. And in this situation, they gave social work graduate students the opportunity to receive a paid internship while working at these different agencies with the commitment to continue to work their 3 years upon graduation. And so that is I think that is an interesting buy-in model for this, right? Is the idea that attached to receiving a paid field practicum is the commitment to stay, but also the idea of job security thereafter. And so that is one way, but it's very rare to see. And another thing is the funding and the opportunities for paid internships in general go towards less helping professions. And in social work, they go to specialties that get the most funding in general. So children, youth, and families, things of that nature. Me personally, I'm at Case Western. Me and another student are the only aging specialties. And so the odds of us finding a paid field practicum is a lot smaller, even though the odds are smaller for someone who's specializing in children, youth, and families. So there's a disparity in the type of field specialty or specialty someone may specialize in. And there's also disparity in the resources allocated to how we do it. So, yeah.
No, that's great. And I think, being creative, Stacy in the comments had just mentioned they have a program like that in Washington State in child welfare, but sometimes for non-child welfare, it does get trickier to find those paid options. I know in Michigan, just this week, our chapter, NASW chapter, is working with our state legislature to try to ask for $30 million in appropriation budget. Specifically, we know that there's a behavioral workforce shortage right now, partially caused by COVID, partially caused by what the workforce was pre-COVID, right? And not really having the same sort of flexibility in terms of hours, working from home, sometimes pay, that sort of thing. But creating opportunities that do have that pipeline into job security after graduation. And hopefully it's a well-paid job, a well-resourced job afterwards. And what we're asking for is $30 million over 3 years that would fund 1,000 MSW students at $30,000 each that would cover their placement for that 6 months. And then, that could cover partial student loans, maybe partial pay for them to live during that period. So it's, sometimes it's about what can you capitalize in the moment, right? And so sometimes there's COVID money that's out there right now that agencies may be able to look at. There's maybe some of these appropriation money that's floating around at your state government. And, that's may not be an option, but I think we have to be a little bit more creative around this. Right.
That's right. And I think that one of the most interesting things is at first, schools may be hesitant to endorse or to get on train with this, but some of the first graduate programs that are social work schools that invest in this, they also will have a competitive advantage over those who have not, or who have not taken the initiative to incorporate this into the educational experience. So.
Yeah, and there's a couple of comments from Erica and Catherine along that same line. It's a very interesting topic because as students, we're not only getting paid for internships, we're only not getting paid, but we're also paying a lot of money for the internship course. And then how do we reform social work as a whole to mandate paid internships, at least at the graduate level? It seems nonsensical that so many are having to choose between education, their families, and their finances. And so, maybe Devon, if you could reiterate some of the specific ways that right now you're asking people to be involved, and then we can open it up to a larger discussion on other ways folks may be able to advocate.
Yeah, so first, let me say that this is really important because there is this terrible stigma around a social work profession being underpaid in general. And so gaining momentum behind something such as a paid field practicum also in part addresses the problem of us being undercompensated for some of the toughest work. And so, like I said, 3 ways to get involved real quick and easy are make a 30-second or 60 to 90-second video about your experience and why paid field practicums could have changed or made your educational experience better. Number 2, there's a survey. There's a survey on the link that I just shared, or that Dwayne shared, excuse me. And thirdly, we are allowing people to do like live conversations on Instagram Live. And so I haven't picked a guest, and it is going to go probably 2-3 weeks out. And so if there is someone in this room that would like to hop on and talk live about this conversation, just to let people hear your experiences, would love to let that happen, or love to see that happen. But yeah, those are the 3 ways people can get involved thus far. And we're currently looking for different ways. We started this, but this is going to be a longer process or a longer project. And so what at the end of this we would like to see is different initiatives and different ideas coming from the work that we do. So, yeah.
And with that, like you said, Devon, this is somewhat of a complex issue in terms of it's a long-term strategy, right? So NASW, we are not overseers of field placement, right, as an organization, but we have partnerships with CSWE, with many of our schools of social work. So I think one good opportunity that all attendees can do is talk to your field offices, start those conversations in, what's the policy at your particular school? Some schools allow for placements, some schools don't, and they have it in policy that students can't get paid at all. And so I think sometimes, again, it's like that pushing from the out and pushing from within model that we need to work at this as well, where, as an organization, NASW can use our collaborative partnerships with organizations like CSWE to further the conversation, but we also need you all to be continually pushing this internally. Sage, I don't know, are there conversations around this happening at UCLA?
Oh, definitely. Yes. And I mean, I can definitely touch on that in my share, but in terms of what Devon mentioned, which is really important work to bring the spotlight under, a lot of students are doing TA ships. So they're working for the university to be able to pay for the tuition and then to be able to have a living stipend. And UC-wide right now, there's a strike, the UAW, which is like the union across all the UCs. So there's definitely equity problems on all levels, not just in the social work program, because in the state of California, the cost to live is just insanity. And so, yeah, I mean, we have subsidized housing for some of the grad students, but it's not a guaranteed that you'll get graduate housing. And so a little bit of a vicious cycle here. And so definitely bringing attention to that. But in our state, along with we call it DCFS, with the child welfare, we also have DMH. So for folks that want to go into county mental health work, they can get a stipend their second year, not their first year, which only covers tuition. And then you have to give, I think, 3 years to the state. But like Devon said, that's guaranteed work right now, which in, this country is important. And so, yeah, that is something that I would love to discuss when we go further on, but I just want to make sure we address everything.
Yeah, and it does sound like from the chat box as well, there's been a lot of strikes happening across many of our campuses. I know Oakland University had strikes early this year, specifically for faculty being underpaid, and they were proposing cutting their pay after a year of COVID, right? And where all faculty across the country had to really extend themselves extra and adapt in ways that, they were not prepared to do, right? And we really give a lot of props to our social work educators who helped along with all these students to get through that last year. What I would suggest as well is if you are protesting on your campus or doing advocacy events on your campus, please reach out to your local NASW chapter. We want to support you students who are doing things like that on your campuses. You also have a BSW and an MSW student rep on your board of directors in your state for NASW. So those are really good students to get to know. And if you've got something that you'd like to share with the larger social work community, that's a really good resource and a way to kind of get your message out to the larger audience. And I know Sage is going to talk a little bit about the My NASW community, but that's also a really good resource at the national level to kind of collaborate and to disseminate information on many other levels. So maybe that's a good transition point into you, Sage. I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the things that are going on in your particular campus, but also what are some of the national conversations you're seeing on the My NASW platform, and what is the My NASW platform?
Okay. Great. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Monica and Devon and Dwayne for having me speak. It's been a privilege. So right now at UCLA, it's a little interesting. I am currently a part of a group of people that are former foster youth, and we are doing a graduate research study on foster youth in the state of California that went to grad school because there's not a lot of research on that. And so that's one thing that has been a topic of conversation. And then right now, in terms of UCLA hiring faculty, the students are very involved in that process because they want to see more professors. Right now, we have one male Black professor at UCLA. And so that is, yeah, so there is a lot of the Black caucus, we have the Latinx caucus, we have API caucus, LGBT caucus. So they're really right now advocating for the next couple of generations and also the next couple of cohorts that are going to come in after us. And that is something right now that has been a huge conversation of unpaid internships. And so right now there's that. I and a few other students receive funding from the Department of Rehabilitation, which is, there's a different name in different states for it. And I'm really grateful that somebody had told me about that. So if, you know, you have ADHD or different diagnoses, that's something, just bringing that up in terms of another place to look for funding for school in your state. And in California, they're very helpful in that regard. And I can't imagine going to school as a former foster youth without that, because school and education and costs are exorbitant. And so right now I'm at UCLA, which, you know, is a public school. There is some conversation because there's down the street USC, which is a private school, and they charge twice the amount for tuition, but yet everyone goes out and makes the same salary in LA. So that's something, it's like, why even go there? And I get it, there's networking and opportunities like that, but over and over, we're kind of hearing in the Los Angeles community, students having regret over taking those loans out at a private school. And so, yeah, I mean, I went to all public schools my entire life, so highly recommend it. And that is one conversation that's been out there. And then at UCLA, we are, of course, back in person. And with COVID, we were online our first year of the MSW program. And so right now, you know, being alerted about, you know, outbreaks and stuff like that, that is a public health concern. And sometimes we're not hearing from the department about it. We hear it through word of mouth. And so that is like a different issue, but at the same time, it impacts our studies and our focus. And so that's been really interesting because my first master's was in global health. And so I'm always curious what Johns Hopkins is up to. And it's definitely, it's impacting our social work in terms of people who have placements at geriatric or child placements, and they're worried about transmission. And so that is something that, how is the department going to take care of this? What if somebody gets sick? Things like that, that maybe weren't thought about last year because we were remote, and then they just kind of abruptly brought us back. And so that is something. And in terms of, I, of course, am an NASW intern. So I, you know, give a big shout out to my NASW community. And this is, you know, part of your membership. So I know some folks don't utilize it, but the student membership group has like 24,000 members. And so there are constantly, every single hour of the day, posts being done on the discussion board. It's definitely not an inactive forum. And I help moderate that actually too. So maybe you'll see me on your posts. Well, meanwhile, some other states, you know, California has like 10,000, but others might have under 1,000, depending on where you live. And so that's something that's really important to do if you're a student in a state that has lower membership in your state group. But you know, the student group is very active. And in terms of reaching out, if you're having issues with maybe a supervisor and you're scared to post it on your Facebook group and see, have other students see that, for instance, you know, UCLA, that's been a conversation topic, like, how do I, you know, talk to them about not going over on my 20 hours a week and being afraid to advocate for your boundaries? That is a huge thing. Social capital is a learned thing. And I definitely didn't know that back in the day. Sorry, my internet connection is a little unstable. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Uh-oh. Okay, you can still hear me? Okay. And so, yeah, I went to community college. I worked in treatment. I identify as a person in long-term recovery. And so before going to UCLA, you know, I had my own journey with different things. And right now it's really important for me to advocate for the recovery group. And the recovery group on campus is, I know University of Michigan has one, it's called a Collegiate Recovery Program. And that's a space for students who are interested in learning about recovery, supporting a loved one in recovery or themselves from any type of substance abuse or any type of usage and or harm reduction. So that's been something that's been really cool in my personal journey. And at UCLA, we advocate for that, the students and myself. We get funding from the school to have a space to have meetings. And that's something that hopefully nationwide is going to happen. You can look up the Association for Recovery in Higher Education. That is another group that I'm a part of that's doing really good work in that area. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely, my NASW has a lot of different perks to it, and also just being a member. So if you want to reach out to me, I bet Dwayne will post my email in the chat. And there are scholarships specifically for NASW students. Like if you're a member and you're a student in an MSW program, take advantage of that because it's usually during your first year. By the time that you're kind of like right now, I'm in my second year and I'm about to finish. So that would not directly apply. I'm also managing as muting people. So I'm multitasking right now. And yeah, so I would love to see if there's any questions in the chat. Oh yeah, I see you posted my email, which is great. Oh yeah, so Marley, definitely reach out to your chapter because I know that like some of the chapters have money put aside just for that. That would be something important to send an email to whoever is at your state chapter, because that's mine is California. And yeah, so Liz, I see your agency won't pay for mileage. Asking them, it's not a problem, it's also a problem. Yeah. And so those kind of conversations, I see people brainstorming on my NASW and talking about how to approach it and find a solution-based approach, which is really important because, you know, I understand like as students, we definitely want to be careful, and it's hard to come up to some of the professors and say, you know, I'm having a problem with this program. For me, I get fellowships from my program. So I'm scared my scholarship money is going to get cut when I make a complaint. But there is a way to know your audience and use your voice in that appropriate way. And also like when to step aside. Like there's certain issues that in advocacy, I tell people like, you know, as someone who's white in America, like I don't have that experience. And so I kind of have to step aside and let my other classmates go in for that. Sorry, I'm admitting people at the same time. But anyway, if there's anything in the chat that you want to add or any questions, I would love to hear it. I know I'm, you know, slightly going over time and I'm muting people. Okay, thanks,
Sage,
Devon.
one of the things I know we had talked about before today was about the basic needs bill that's coming up in California. And I'm wondering if you could talk about some of that advocacy work.
So I wear many hats, everyone. Over the summer, I interned for the California Community College Chancellor's Office, which we now have a statewide bill, which is going to have a basic needs center in every single California community college, which there's over 100. And now at the UCs, the University of California and the California states, which are public universities, there is a movement to get basic needs, whether it's food recovery, whether it's meal vouchers for extended periods of time, whether it's hotel vouchers for housing expenses, all the way to like laundry supplies and things like that. For the foster youth program at UCLA, they give textbook money, which is really, really helpful when you don't have $500 a quarter to spend towards textbooks. But these basic needs programs are trying to fill in the gaps for other marginalized communities as well, or any student that is in need. And so that will be really cool to see, because in 2017, when I was going to UCSD, that was about the first year they started their basic needs center, which you wouldn't think a ginormous university would have any type of service for that. But they've been a little bit behind the ball, I think in California. And so now it's really interesting to see how they're going to advocate for students who are struggling with homelessness and living in their car, and then they need to find a place to shower before class. And so how are we going to do that? And this bill that just came out is a huge resource. I just made a toolkit, and they're going to start hiring MSWs in the California Basic Needs programs. So that will be really cool. And I kind of help them bridge that gap and advocate for interns being there and for MSWs to be hired specifically for that job. And, you know, there's all sorts of really cool ins and outs of basic needs. It doesn't always mean food. Sometimes it means, like in California, you can recycle your car and you can get $1,500 for that. And it's little stuff like that, that like tips and trades that people just, you know, need in a certain moment. And tax rebates, stuff like that, places to go when you're in certain troubles. And so crisis, you know, but also this is really looking at prevention and not looking at it as, you know, the last resort, trying to help a student out before they get to that point of crisis. So that's something I'm really passionate about, because being in different populations like the recovery community, the foster youth community, transfer, I've seen a lot of students just not being able to eat. And so, and be able to get by with their basic needs, or they're living on someone's couch or in their car. And so that is something that hopefully as social workers will be more embedded in these programs, which will go nationwide. Right now, Chancellor Oakley of the California Community College system is working with Biden. So that's really cool that our California Community College chancellor is over in the White House. And so I really hope to see these changes. But yeah, that is a lot. And I saw somebody put something in the chat. Okay, I'll reach out to you, Kay. And every school has different programs for book support. So definitely reach out and ask. It doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, thank you, Sage. I mean, I think support for students, I mean, it's critical right now. I mean, the other thing that we're seeing nationally is kind of a lack of support and a workforce shortage on college campuses around mental health. You know, I had a student member reach out to me this weekend and say, you know, I'm having some issues. I went to my college counseling center. They don't have enough people available, so they turned me away because they didn't deem me as an immediate need. I deem me as an immediate need. And, you know, what do I do now? So I think that, you know, we're seeing that as well as everything that has already existed pre-COVID, right? And how do we best support each other on our campuses? And I think one of the things I always recommend for students to do as early as possible is to like build out your social work bubble as large as possible before you graduate. The more people that you know that you're connected to, you know, half of our title is social, right? And the introvert in me, that makes me like cringe a little bit, but like it means we have to be networked and connected and resourced. And the better we can do that internally, the more we're going to be able to help our clients and ourselves whenever we may need something. So I'm curious from the three of you, are there other things kind of since the pandemic has started that have popped out as bigger needs or larger needs within the social work community, whether that be students or professionals that you all have experienced?
I think for me, Dwayne, I've just noticed a significant spike of people in need of behavioral health services. Some of the people that I worked with prior to the pandemic, you know, had certain issues, but now they've also developed like anxiety and depression around being quarantined and not being able to be around family. And then if they have loved ones who are in like assisted living or nursing facilities or in the hospital, helping them to deal with those adjustment issues. And then God forbid if one of them passes away. So then we're dealing with grief and loss issues as well. So I think that's primarily the biggest thing that I have seen that has been on an uptrend. And I think it's going to continue to be on an uptrend for a while.
One of the things that I think I've seen, because I'm involved with a lot of different nonprofit organizations, and I started as a community practice and shifted to direct practice. And so I've had an opportunity to kind of make connections in both. And I've seen for social workers in particular, it's I think a yearning that I've never really witnessed before, those who are in direct practice to become more macro oriented or to get more involved. And those who are macro oriented want to refine or gain more skills within direct practice to inform the macro or community work. And so I think that hints to a greater thing, which being people are understanding that there must be some type of balance within their life, some type of functional balance between work and life, or home and exterior. And so time to touch on what Monica said about mental health and the need for it, what I found is it's no longer about being a social worker in your professional spaces anymore, the places as you occupy for employment. It's really about taking those tenets and those values and instilling it in your social life, in your recreational life, and these different avenues, and creating that safe space, because it has been, I think, one of those things where people didn't understand how important it is to speak openly and to speak within spaces where you can be vulnerable. And so, yeah.
Yeah, Devon, I think that is right on. I think what the pandemic has opened up for us as a country is everybody is talking about mental health. Like everybody has experienced depression, anxiety, stress, at least one of those three things, if not all of those three things over the last 18 months, right? Even if maybe you hadn't in the past. And so what we're seeing in Michigan, and I would guess that this is happening nationally, is that even at the legislative level, there are more opportunities to talk about mental health. And then that opens up pathways for potential money as well, right? How can we and you don't want to capitalize on COVID, but you want to use this time for what it is. Mental health was an issue before COVID, right? We need to be having these conversations always, and social workers should be the ones at the table always in these conversations. Partially, we need more social workers to run for office at all levels, right? So I know many of the chapters throughout NASW do candidate training. The Nancy Humphrey Institute out of Connecticut does social work candidate training, so shout out to them. You know, that there are some really good ways that we need social workers to be involved in those macro spaces. But like the topic for our next town hall in December, I think all social work is macro social work, right? We sometimes have these distinctions. I'm a macro license technically because Michigan has that, but you have to have those skills to be able to know what the system is that is oppressing your clients, or where your funding source comes from, what lawmaker is making what decision on your behalf, right? And so how do we make sure that we are in as many of those places as possible? And I would guess, you know, if we had the time to talk to everybody in this room, I bet many of you are at some really important tables that we need to know about. Like, we need to share what sort of collaborations are we a part of? What sort of coalitions? Are you appointed to a statewide something, or your university something, right? Can we share that with the larger social work community? So then if we need to work with each other, it doesn't feel like we're in these silos, but we really are this collective body. You know, my experience in social work is that social workers are really great at advocating for themselves or for their clients, but like sometimes really terrible about advocating for themselves. And a lot of our work tends to be individual, even if our title is social. You might be a private practitioner, you might be working in a school, you might be in a mental health clinic, where you're not going to be surrounded by a lot of social workers all the time. And so your work can feel very isolating. And so the more that we can stay connected to our larger professional community, the better it's going to be for all of us, because we can move the ball forward a little bit quicker. So we have about 20 minutes left. I would love for folks to post other topics that you would like to talk about, or if you wanted to go into anything we've talked about so far a little bit further into the chat, you can raise your hand and Sage will unmute. My computer is frozen on my end, so that's why I'm not letting people in right now. That's a weird Zoom thing, but we'd love to hear from you all who chose to be here today.
Don't be shy.
I'll be not shy. My name's Liz McCulley. I'm in Washington State, specifically in Seattle, and I just took over for the MSW representative position on the board for the chapter because someone had to move. And I am really interested in the growing population of students online. I'm personally in an online program, and as an online student, there's not as many ways to connect. And I think that that's should be pretty easy to fix since we're living through so many Zoom rooms. And I'm also interested in the blending of the fact that being an online student means that I'm not connecting with students in my state. And so there's a wider bridge to cross between student life and professional life. And I'm nearing graduation in May. And I'm doing a lot of my own legwork to make connections, but I'm not being aided by my college at all in that, except because my college is in a different state. It's my responsibility to know what to do for licensure. It's my responsibility to make my own connections in my state. And I think that that is a disservice to students who, as we have been discussing, are paying an awful lot for everything along the way. I just paid to graduate, and it's an irony, it's another $25 so I can apply to graduate. It's just there's a lot of costs, and it keeps adding up, and it doesn't make it easier to be in social work. And I think that in a field where everyone says, let's diversify, let's lift up marginalized populations, and then there's just this really awkward silence as no one wants to foot the bill for it and face the fact that in order to change things, somebody's got to start paying and making it possible to do that, because the finances are really difficult. So I'm happy to connect. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm so glad you guys have hosted this today.
Thank you, Liz. I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts around how to connect. I see that there's a lot of support in the chat from students who are also online. And, I think that since I've been with the chapter at NASW, I went to the University of Michigan on in-person campus, but, online campuses have existed for a long time, and students have struggled with finding connection and resources, even within their own institution. And sometimes that's where an organization like NASW or NABSW or other, there's other social work associations can help as an additional support outside of your university. But I'm wondering if other students who are maybe online programs have tips for Liz or for our other online students. That's okay if not. I do see a question, Sage, maybe you can answer this one. Has the My NASW community group ever been used to take collection action like advocacy, lobbying, or activism?
Definitely, yes. That is a way that we also bring attention to events that are happening. So if there's, the announcement section, definitely check that. Sometimes people post on the discussion board, but yes, there is collective action like that. And then I see, oh, that's good. Someone feels more connected. Yay. Sorry, I was reading the comments.
Well, I think that, events are a great way to get connected. Many of your social work schools, NASW, other community groups are putting on conferences, continuing education, and a lot of those are virtual right now, which makes them a little bit more accessible even at the national level. I know in Michigan, almost all of our events are free for our student members to attend because we want you to be at all of our stuff whenever possible, and it's usually discounted those first 3 years out of school as well. And so even if you see an event that says continuing education, a lot of times that doesn't mean you have to be licensed or need continuing education to attend it. You may just want to build a network to expand your skill set, right? And the same thing I think Sage had mentioned earlier, or Monica, about many of your local chapters and organizations have work groups, special interest groups, committees. We have political action committees. So if you're interested in getting social workers elected for office, endorsing candidates, looking at policies, those exist in every state. Most states have special groups. So we have private practice ones, LGBT, human animal bond, gerontology, right? Depending on your state, it may fluctuate what specific ones are available. And if there's not a group, a lot of times your local chapters are able to assist with creating that. I will say one of the challenges at NASW is we have 54 chapters, one in every state. Guam, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and New York City has a chapter, and there's also an international chapter as well. But every chapter is really differently staffed. We have some chapters that have one executive director, up to, I think California has around 9 staff there. So it's a pretty small operation. And I think a lot of times people think we're a giant group that has unlimited resources and people power, but we really are a small social work operation like most of our organizations are, which is why we really rely on our members to help push us in the directions we need to go. And so if you want to create an abolitionist group within your state chapter, I would bet your executive director would be open to having that conversation, right? But it's just, who is somebody going to take the leadership within your particular chapter to do it? But there are some creative ways that people are getting connected right now. And I think that this is a really good time, since everything has moved virtual, for us to be able to connect even more on a national or global level. Other questions? Any hands
Hi,
raised?
this is Linda.
Oh, great,
Hi.
Linda, thanks.
Since you brought up global level, I'm an advanced standing MSW student at Fordham University, and I'm placed at the United Nations. I'm also the International Federation of Social Workers student representative.
Wonderful.
So from the international perspective, I'd be interested in maybe the NASW kind of aligning more with the radical policies and programs of the IFSW. And I understand that the NASW is kind of supportive of individual social workers, and they need to take into consideration that social workers' ideology is a spectrum, just as Americans are. But the IFSW is really interested in transforming the profession and going back to a bottom up and making sure that social workers are at the height of changing social protections instead of just working in a crisis mode. So I'd be interested in how the NASW is kind of working towards that same goal of transforming the profession so that we're no longer reacting to crises, but actually at the forefront like we were when the profession began.
That's a great question. I'm so excited that you're here. A lot of social workers don't even know that those organizations exist, right? There's an International Federation of Social Workers. There's several international groups, well, just a couple for social workers, but there's also Social Work Day at the UN, which happens every March. I don't know if you are
I'm
a
in
part
charge.
of that. Oh, wonderful.
I will be doing it. So please, March, I think 22nd, we're programming it. I hope to see you all there.
Is that going to be virtual again?
We meet in December, so it may be. But yeah, fortunately.
Fingers crossed from somebody who doesn't live out that direction. But yeah, there are ways for social workers to get connected to those international and global environments. And NASW, I know, is parts of coalitions with the IFSW and the other social work organizations. They meet regularly, the leadership meet, same thing with CSWE, ASWB. All the organizations do have communication with one another. Everyone kind of has somewhat of their own mission and lanes that they work with, but there definitely are some common themes that, if there are things that group is working on that they want NASW support, NASW connect with either the local chapter or the national policy director. And we always are open to hearing about what are folks doing and best ways to collaborate. Monica, on your end, I'm curious, as part of the National Ethics Committee, what sort of relationship do you have with various states in terms of ethical workshops or materials or just communication?
So it's, not myself personally, but amongst the NEC as a whole, we try to reach out to as many states as we can. I know that there is a project that's being considered where each NEC member is going to be assigned, hopefully like a region or, a few several numbers of states that we will be responsible to reach out to, because that's some of the feedback that the NEC has received over the years, is that like the chapter ethics committees sometimes don't feel supported, and we want to make them feel more supported. We want to let them know that we are actually human beings. We are not robots, and we do exist. So that's something that's certainly being considered, but between myself and the other members of the cadre, we certainly have people who are certainly able to reach out in their respective states. We have, I think we cover Washington State, we cover Illinois. I think we have two one in Illinois, I think one in Indiana, one in Texas. So we're kind of spread out all over the place. And, hence that makes us at least a little bit able to kind of extend our reach a bit more. But again, for any state, if you guys have any questions or anything, reach out to me by email. And, if you guys are in need of something, even if it's just like a conversation with me, that's perfectly fine. I'm more than happy to do it to your CEC, to your NASW chapter, to, a cohort of students at your university. I'm more than happy to do that. So please retain my email and feel free to use it.
Thanks, Monica.
Mhm.
Devon, there's been a few continued conversations and comments around kind of the field piece and unpaid internships. I wonder if you have any advice for folks on the line about how best they might be able to talk to their field offices directly to start a conversation.
So one of the first things I would say is, then this sounds like it goes back to that conversation we were having earlier about good trouble. I think connect with other students first. I think, and the reason that I say this is because shared experience is a lot more valuable than enclosed discussions. And so when you have these conversations with your field placement supervisors and things of that nature, they've already heard it from other people. And I think that allows for the conversation to go a little better. But when you are talking directly to like a field placement agency or a field placement advisor that works with the school, one of the things I started talking to my past one and seeing some of the issues or some of the contingent, what's the word I'm looking for? Some of the issues that schools may have with this. And she was saying that it's almost as if you demand change too soon. I think the first thing that we want to do is to create this conversation. It will be very hard for, I think, any school to pull out the funding in the next 6 months or year to fund your next year. The goal is to create better experiences and outcomes for those that come after us. I know this is a rough thing to say for us because we are grappled with this problem, but we want to create a better system for those going forward. And so I would say when you are coming to your field faculty or staff members, keep in mind that this is a process that takes over time, and don't make them an enemy, but show them how concerned you are about this for the experiences of people that come after you and the big part that they play in this. Just having one field faculty member on our side respectively or on this side of this issue can make a big change within the culture, within that staff and within that school. So yeah, one step at a time.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, Devon. And I think that that's sometimes a struggle in social work. All the work that we're doing, whether it's advocacy work at the local or national level, it's small, right? We always want to get to that end change, but it feels painful to just move one little notch at a time and sometimes go back a notch to be able to then move one more forward. But that's the reality of a lot of the systems we move in. So we have to keep those conversations happening, which is partially why we wanted to have this today, because we know that conversations around unpaid internships, it's not a new conversation, right? So we have to keep talking about it if we want something to change. And there have been changes at various institutions that have happened, or at individual agencies. Sometimes it's got to be at that level. Stacy had mentioned in the conference or in the comments, if your program doesn't have a student representative on their committees, that's a great place to start. Absolutely. On your policy committees, on your curriculum committees, right? On your field committees, absolutely ask for a student to be invited to that. Same thing with your chapter. Every NASW chapter has a student rep, a BSW and an MSW student rep. Every year, it's a 1-year term. Those positions are likely going to be opening. So we're going to need people to run all across the country for those. And then there's also positions on the national NASW board of directors as well. So, if you really want to be one of those good troublemakers within our association, that's a great place to do it. And then recruit all your people to make sure they vote in those elections as well. But that's some good internal politics about how you make change within, the association world. I know, Monica, some of the conversations I've been seeing nationally are around, and we've just got a couple more minutes for questions, but for folks who want to make a change to the code of ethics or want to make their voice heard in that process, how does that happen and when can they be involved in that?
Okay, so that's an excellent question, Dwayne. So, as Dwayne said, there's 54 chapters of the NASW. I would certainly suggest that you get active within your particular state's chapter and inquire about their chapter ethics committee. We do have some states that are unfortunately unrepresented or underrepresented in terms of ethics committee members. And then also, stay in tune with socialworkers.org, sign up to get like notifications and things of that sort. Because with the last updates to the code of ethics, there was kind of like a call for feedback on the proposed changes to that. So that's the opportunity where you have to kind of chime in and to say, hey, has anybody ever thought about this? Because we're only a group of so many people on the NEC, so we can't possibly think of everything. And that's where we really depend on our membership to also kind of say, hey, did you think about this? Of course, not getting too wide in our breath in terms of making changes. Otherwise, we end up rewriting the whole thing, right? So, but yeah, that's how I would certainly suggest that you consider getting involved and getting your feedback heard.
And like Monica said, the code of ethics does come up for revision every several years. And so the other ways to get involved is there's always a public comment period. So you can write in suggestions of changes or additions you'd like to see, as well as every chapter has delegates. So it's our voting body for things like the code of ethics or internal policy within NASW. So if you've ever wondered, does NASW have a position on X, which could be immigration, refugee issues, family planning, child welfare? The answer is yes. NASW has a policy position on pretty much everything that you can think of. And our members vote on that through our delegate body. So it almost works like the Electoral College. I hate to say that because the Electoral College is messed up, but every chapter gets a certain amount of voting members based off their chapter size. And so in Michigan, we have 9 delegates that are elected by our membership, but students can also be delegates as well. And those are 3-year terms that you are then the voting representative on behalf of your chapter. So it's a really good specific way where you could have a voice at the policy level within the association. I know we just have a couple of minutes left, so I want to first thank everybody for sticking around, giving us, some of us on the East Coast, your evening, those of us on the West Coast, your afternoon, to be here today. And I just want to throw it out to our panelists. Any last thoughts, words of wisdom, reflection for tonight that you'd like to share before we head off?
Sure. My last thoughts, I think, to all of you all as aspiring social workers is to get involved, stay active, advocate, and as Devon said, get into good trouble.
I would thank you, Monica. I second that, of course. Real fast, I would just say that this is something that we must understand as to be very important for, like I said, future generations. And I think that the work that we're doing now, even if we are not talking about particularly paid field practicums, but just the work that we do, we must be mindful that this takes effort, and do not underestimate your value and your worth in this work and the effect and the cause and effect that you have in other people's lives. You deserve to be fairly compensated for that. And you deserve to have a standard of living and a quality of living that mirrors the hard work and the emotional turmoil that you may go through to help other people and assist other people. So, yeah.
Awesome. And I would also like to add to that in terms of being able to, ask when you need help. One of the best things I've ever been able to do was get mentors and to have folks who kind of showed me the way. That's how I was able to get like a summer paid job in doing policy work. Unfortunately, it didn't count towards my hours, but, to be able to have that opportunity to sit at the table with the chancellors in the California community college system, that was through my mentor. And so they're alumni from your school, and, check out those resources. I was paired with somebody through my school's program, and, they want to help you. And so don't be afraid to ask. Alrighty.
Well, thank you again to the 3 of you. Thank you all who are on this line for choosing social work, right? these are tough conversations. They're not necessarily always the most positive topics that we're talking about in social work, but we're all about making change in this field. So I'm hoping that we are just going to continue to have these really critical conversations in the field, that this may spark something to go back to your campus or your NASW local chapter. You know, we're here to support you, even if we've got tiny teams at the state level, but we are here to be a voice with you, to work with whatever fight you are doing locally. We hope to see you at our next event on March 13th. That's going to be from 6 to 7:30 p.m. You can find information for that on the NASW national site. And then in January, we'll be hosting a national career fair. So that's also a good opportunity to get to explore agencies from all across the country and see what people are hiring, what sorts of positions are out there, titles, you know, salary ranges, all that sort of stuff. And we hope you will join us for one of those and many more conversations. But just a last, again, thank you to both Monica, Devon, and Sage for your time and expertise. I hope everyone has a great holiday season. We're getting into a bunch of holidays. So good luck the rest of the semester, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, everyone.